Hello everyone, my name is Catalyst, welcome back to the channel, and welcome to the first episode of Battlefield Breakdown, a series in which I analyze elite Battlefield players' gameplay and explain why and how they are able to perform at such a high level. For today's episode, we are taking a look at the console aimbot himself, Maxiq. Since this is the first episode of the series, I want to take some extra time to lay out the groundwork for how the series works, and what you can expect moving forward before we get started talking about Max. If you would like to skip the explanation of the video, you can fast forward to the start of the analysis by selecting the timestamp in the description or scrubbing through the video's table of contents. First and foremost, the players that will be featured in this series will all be streamers and YouTubers, and while the first episode has been predetermined as I asked Max specifically to collaborate with me on this project, you are free to suggest players and streamers that you would like to see featured in the future episodes. There is no platform bias. We will be covering players from both console and PC, especially since both platforms emphasize different skill sets. This isn't necessarily a popularity contest either, but I am narrowing down the criteria to only content creators as they are easily accessible to more people, and for those who want to watch these players and learn more, they can easily do so. So even though there are plenty of great players out there, those who don't consistently produce content will be overlooked for those who do. As of right now, I will only cover players that are actively playing Battlefield 5, and while this may change in the future, Battlefield 5 is the most recent game in the franchise, and the game is receiving an influx of new and old players due to store sales and the hype for the next Battlefield game. This is an educational series at its core, so it makes sense to teach where there is the most demand for it. This is also not a conversation about who is the best Battlefield 5 player overall, and most will agree with me when I say that objectively speaking, there is no quote-unquote best player, but instead, there is a pool of elite players that all have their strengths and weaknesses. That is why for this series, the plan is for there to be 7 episodes, with each episode focusing on one specific skill that the player does exceptionally well, even if they are good at other things covered in other episodes. Why 7 episodes specifically? Well, it's indirectly inspired by the 7 deadly sins, but instead of sins, it's player skills. And 7 is a good number to make sure that the series also doesn't overstay its welcome. Oh, and one more thing. I have not cherry-picked any gameplay here. I have asked Maxiq to send me whatever he would like to, so I had no idea what he was going to send me for this video until I saw it in the editing studio. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Initially, I struggled to find one thing to focus on for Maxiq for the context of this video, as I personally find Max to be one of the most well-rounded players actively playing in the game at the moment. I've had the pleasure of watching Maxiq grow from being a public lobby player to somebody who has won multiple championships competitively, and as I've told him personally, it's been interesting watching that transformation occur, and how he's made that transformation in a little less than a year. And then it hit me. That's exactly what I should focus on for this video. Max's ability to process information quickly, learn from it, and use his experience to dominate the battlefield. Now, I know what some of you are saying. Well, the man is max rank in the game. Of course you can say that he is the most experienced player. My argument to that would be that game time does not exactly equal skill at the game, and just because you play the game a lot does not mean that you process information the same way, or even process it correctly. This is, in my opinion, what separates Maxiq apart from others that simply just have a lot of playing time. His ability to process information and make correct decisions based on his experience in the game, not because he has, at the time of this recording, 3,900 hours of game time. Up until this point, we've seen Maxiq mostly taking advantage of unaware snipers and using his verticality as a weapon on the battlefield, but here's where you start to notice the experience come into play. He finds himself in a 1vx situation, but instead of panicking and trying to take them all on at once, notice how he calmly navigates the terrain and cover around him to force himself into multiple 1v1 gunfights instead of taking all the players head on. The way Max plays this is outstanding. Because he decides to take individual gunfights instead of trying to be fancy and take out the entire spawn rush, he effortlessly takes out nearly every single player around him one by one until he is mostly all alone. I say mostly because he does nearly get killed from behind by a low-level Sten, but is quickly able to process where he's being shot from based on the bullets impacting on the wall in front of him, and is able to do enough damage before a teammate gets the pickup kill. This is all extremely important that Max does this due to Battlefield 5's attrition system. Knowing that he would probably not survive taking on 2 players at once, he instead opts to take them on individually, especially knowing that he is playing the assault class and only has one health kit to his person. Not only does he not waste this health kit by getting into a bad gunfight, he goes this entire clip without using the health kit at all, which is extremely impressive considering how many people he's killed in this position. A lot of times, because of how overbearing the attrition system is in Battlefield 5, players have the tendency to use their health pack immediately upon taking damage, but Maxiq doesn't do that in this clip. Why? Because he's watching how much health he has left and is choosing not to use the health kit, choosing to regenerate naturally based on the pace in which he's taking gunfights. He doesn't feel pressured because he knows where enemy players are, and I'll explain why and how he knows once we rewatch the clip. At first glance, everything in this clip seems relatively simple, but the amount of analyzing and decision making that Max does here is higher than you think it is. We've seen the kills already once through, but now pay attention to the game situation. Some of you might be questioning why Max decides to jump off the bridge here and give up the high ground. There are a few reasons actually. By now most of you have recognized that this is airborne on Rotterdam and there are 4 objectives to destroy. If you've been paying attention, you would have noticed by now that 2 objectives have been destroyed, specifically the one underneath the bridge where Max is. This knowledge alone creates a butterfly effect that completely influences Max's decision making. Number 1, Max knows that after he kills the stragglers on the bridge, there are no enemies spawning there. Number 2, having checked the scoreboard before parachuting in, Max knows roughly how many teammates of his are alive. And number 3, he knows the enemy is respawning and he knows exactly where they are going and where they're coming from because he knows the spawns. The spawns for the remaining objectives are under the train at the A conquest flag and in the British deployment. So where does Max go? Right in the middle of that to cut off the respawn wave. Now some of you PTFO advocates out there might also be questioning why Max isn't playing on the objective. Well, firstly, he doesn't have to, and secondly, his actions are directly benefiting his team by killing off the countering wave of enemies. He puts himself in the perfect position to intercept the respawn wave, and it works so well because he is playing off the idea that the enemy team is not going to expect him to be A, that far pushed up, and B, they're not going to be expecting to be shot at in their own spawn area, as evident by the same guy that Max kills twice in the same position. Under that new context, that explains why he makes the decisions that he makes, but also shows how much thought goes into his actions, and because Max knows the spawns and felt out the flow of the game in real time, his experience allowed him to pull off a really nice streak and help win the first day of the Grand Ops for his team. When first doing the pre-planning for this video, I actually debated on whether or not to talk about Maxiq's movement specifically for the video because it's such an integral part of how Maxiq plays Battlefield and is one of the few things that separates good players from great players, especially on console. Now, before any of you PC Master Race folks gets too antsy, yes, movement is a huge part of our games too. My movement has been a big part of my game whether I'm playing on PlayStation 4 or now on PC. Movement is equally as important on both platforms, just in different ways. On console, it goes beyond just doing some AD strafing and jump peeking to outplay your opponent, because on console, you're not just trying to outplay the opponent, you are also trying to outplay the opponent's aim assist too. In addition to snap aim assist, which targets the center mass of whatever is visible to the player, slowdown aim assist greatly helps players track targets due to the thumbstick being an inferior input device for aiming, and because of that, the below average to average console player is often going to be more consistent than the below average to average PC player due to that extra help from the aim assist. Even though the aim assist isn't as bad compared to Call of Duty or Apex, the aim assist still does help quite a bit. So sporadic movement and mastery of the movement mechanics in the game over time help Maxiq win gunfights in situations that he really shouldn't. We've already gone through the clip once, and you can probably guess the moment that we're going to focus on, but we have a bunch to talk about, so I'm going to take this at about 75% speed. We see Max once again in his playground, aka Grand Operations, and he is on a back flank. And there are 2 things in particular that you should really pay attention to here, and that's A, Maxiq's positioning, and B, the use of the slide. We see Max jump out here and notice how many enemies are in front of him, and after killing one and nearly killing another, he decides to fall back towards his team as opposed to either staying at that position or moving down to his left where there is a risk of getting killed by an enemy coming off spawn. And this is really smart, but what he does next is even more so. We've talked about experience a bunch already today, and if you've played Narvik before, you know that these trees are very thick and easy to hide in and not very easy to see through. Max uses this knowledge to outplay an entire wave of enemies, sliding quickly in and out of the trees to take the enemies out one by one. And this is an important distinction to make here, and a mistake that other players might make, is that Max slides in and out of the trees as opposed to staying in the trees and running the risk of getting spotted. And he does this because even if a player sees him peek out or hears his footsteps, the trees provide enough cover to create an escape for Max if he needs one, or mask the exact direction that he is peeking or walking from, and it works so well. And of course, the big payoff here is that Max has such a good control of his movement that in the 1v2 he kills the first guy and is able to push in one direction with the slide and pull so hard back on his stick that the enemy player here just gets absolutely gets his ankles broken, and Max knows it too. I think he said something in this clip like, "Man, try tracking that one, buddy." And I've known Max for a bit now, and he's a pretty mild-mannered guy, so when he beats you this bad and he lets you know it, you know that you kind of got poopied on a little bit. And, you know, throughout the rest of the clip here, we see more good positioning from Max when he gets to the bunker here and peeks it. And knowing that the sniper in the corner has seen him, he does a really nice sliding jump peek here and then does a good job of going prone so that he loses his enemy's line of sight. It's the small things like this that show some mastery of the movement that's in the game. I know I've gotten comments on videos in the past condemning me for sliding and jumping all the time, and Max does it more than me, and I'm sure Max has gotten comments about it as well. People seem to think that the persistent sliding is annoying and useless, but trust me, there is a reason we do it, and this is a good example of why. And here, just really quickly, is a nice example of an ice skate, which is probably Battlefield 5's most advanced movement mechanic, and I think Max does it really well, probably better than anybody. And look at this turnaround snap. It's just so pretty to look at. And the final clip today that I want to show you, technically we've already seen it here today, but I wanted to incorporate everything we've talked about so far and also briefly talk about reaction time before the video is done. I think this clip sums up everything that Max does really well quite nicely. The first talking point here goes back to Maxiq's experience and map knowledge, and this is the type of detail that if you blink, you will miss it, but it saves Max's life here. So Max finds himself on the flank, and most players in the situation, I feel, especially after getting a couple kills straight off the rip here, would probably chase the kill since there is a high probability of players being up over where the turret is being built. That's a pretty common spot on Al Marj. Over time, most good players develop some kind of internal clock that they keep in mind while playing, and this clock is something that you develop once you get an advanced understanding of how map flow and rotations work. So next time you're watching your favorite player, whether that be Max or maybe somebody like Enders, you'll kind of notice how they subconsciously know where enemies are coming from on rotations and spawns based on how the match is flowing and unfolding. Max, knowing that the enemy respawn is back down this lane and knowing that people have already died on the push and are going to be coming off respawn, does a slight peek down this lane and sees somebody coming out of the corner of his eye and is able to quickly turn, hit him with some of that nasty slide movement that we talked about earlier, and get the kill. Now here's where reaction time and a little bit of luck comes into play. Max will be the first person to admit that if this Maxiq player were any other class besides a scout, he would be dead in the situation. But hey, who's to say that good players don't get lucky every now and again? You know, or we can just go with the theory that Max saw her before turning around, but you know, whatever works. What I will say, however, is that once Max turns around and notices that the player is the scout class, Max displays a great amount of game IQ and reaction time. Recognizing that the player is a sniper, Max knows that the player will be going for upper body shots or headshots to be effective, or waste time taking out the pistol, so Max changes the eye level, lies down on his back, which normally gets a negative reaction when players do that in Battlefield 5, and gets the kill here as well. Now strap in, because it gets kind of nuts here moving forward. Max, noticing that he is low on ammo and guessing that more people are coming from the spawn, realizes that he can't take a fight here. So he runs away, notices that his assumption that he was getting pushed from the spawn was correct, and uses his movement, a slide to make aim assist tracking more difficult, and he jumps over the rushing MMG player, again changing the eye level to where he can get a reload off before killing him, and then having the map knowledge to go over to the head glitch on the other side and reposition himself to get more kills against the wave of enemies counter-pushing. Did you get all of that? It kind of happened pretty fast. You can go back and watch this in slow motion, and you just see so many times in which Max should have died, but didn't, due to quick thinking, reaction time, and good use of movement. Had he not slid out of that spot and jumped over the enemy, he would have died. If he just decided to run away, he probably would have died, not to mention some good target prioritization at the end here, taking out the player with the LMG, a shotgun, and then the same Maxiq sniper that just spawned on the spawn beacon that somehow has survived all of this time, with a little flare at the end with a lean. And sure, Max is doing things here that aren't teachable. Recoil control, really snappy aim, and really good mechanics which make him a good player, but it's the small decisions and small things that you may not notice in real time that make Maxiq, in my opinion, one of the best console players. Thank you so much for watching this video, everybody. Who would you like to see me break down next? Leave your comments and suggestions in the comment section below. I want to thank Max for doing this collaboration with me. As always, I greatly appreciate your friendship. The link to Maxiq's channel is in the description, but chances are, if you're here, you already know who he is. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you like it for me, and if you're new here, consider subscribing. I'll be making more Battlefield 5 and Battlefield 2042 content leading up to the release of the new game. If you want to be notified every time I make a video, click the bell so you never miss an upload. I also stream 4 days a week over on Twitch. You can follow me at twitch.tv/catalyst_HD. Once again, thank you all so much for watching. My name is Catalyst, and I will see you all another time.